quantum mechanics is really the play and display of information, the play and display of potentiality.
Who is John Hagelin, or however you pronounce that name? He is a lecturer and professor of physics at Maharishi University of Management, a Minister of Science and Technology of the, quote, global country of world peace, end quote. Minister, I think that says it all. Is cited on the movie's website as holding an AB and an MA and PhD, although strangely the site doesn't list what those degrees are in. Is specified as a world-renowned quantum physicist on the site. His scientific credits and work continued in 1984 at the Maharishi University of Management. He began, quote, research, end quote, in 1987 with 2 papers published in 87 and 89 in the Journal of Modern Science and Vedic Science on the, quote, relationship between physics and consciousness, end quote. Has been criticized for implying that the unified field theory and consciousness as a field are interrelated without providing a shred of evidence. What is the Maharishi University of Management? It is a school that is founded around the transcendental meditation technique, a part of the Maharishi Vedic approach to health. Yep, it's religious. Offers, quote, consciousness-based education, end quote, that includes the practices of the transcendental meditation technique. Was founded by the late Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Has been described as teaching the practice of transcendental meditation as a cult as opposed to a culture, and as a grandiose narcissistic dream, a form of intellectual bondage that they call enlightenment.
Waves of information, waves of potential electron. And it's important, the word potential. This isn't the world of electrons, it's the world of potential electrons.
If I had any spare cash to lay down, I would place a bet that Dr. Hagelin, or however you pronounce his name here, is about to erect a straw man that he can use to make his own argument.
But when you have to ask the question, waves of what, really? What is the field that is waving? Is it the ocean? No, it's a universal ocean.
And I would have won that bet. A universal ocean? This is absurd in the highest degree. A universal ocean has not been established in quantum physics. Yes, the theory involves electrons as waves among other quantum effects, but we are still investigating what all this means, and as such, speculating on what it is, such that you can then make statements to the effect that these waves constitute a universal ocean, and then go on to speculate what you think and believe allows you to change reality on a whim, is simply fallacious nonsense.
An ocean of pure potentiality, an ocean of abstract potential existence. We call it the unified field, or superstring field. And that's what we're made of.
This is an unfounded assertion. Aside from the physical makeup of our bodies, you know, muscle, sinew, etc., and indeed all matter in the universe, hydrogen, iron, oxygen, so on, we are not made up of ideas and abstract potential. Abstracts and the ideas of abstract potential are concepts. They require people to come up with these ideas. As such, we cannot be made up of these things. We are made up of physical elements. This has been consistently tested. Superstring theory is still an emerging field. While it is correct to say that there is evidence for quantum effects within electrons, and while there is evidential support for some parts of string theory, it is a huge leap of logic to claim that we are all made up of these superstrings and abstracts, and that we can change reality by thought as a consequence, as this movie is still trying to claim.
Connectivity, among all things, is a basic constituent of the fabric of reality. It's very difficult to wrap your mind around that. But Erwin Schrödinger said, he's one of the founders of quantum mechanics, that entanglement, which is this idea of this connectivity, is not just a property of quantum mechanics, it's the property. It's the property of quantum mechanics that makes it very, very strange.
Indeed. But to extrapolate that to make the statement that how we think therefore has a direct influence on our reality is to commit a non sequitur. Indeed, the following theatrics that we are skipping are highly suggestive that we can alter reality just by thought. Unfortunately for the producers of the show, that is not the case no matter how much people wish that it were.
We were all taught in school that the world is made of stuff, of matter, of mass, of atoms. Atoms make up molecules, molecules make up materials, and everything is made of that. But atoms actually are mostly empty.
At the atomic scale there is a lot of empty space, but this does not invalidate the observations made at the macroscopic level.
For example, if this ball were the nucleus of an atom, a proton in a hydrogen atom, for example, then the electron circling this, which would describe the outer limits of that atom, would be out by that mountain over there, roughly 20 miles away. And everything in between is empty. In fact, the universe is mostly empty. However, when we go down in scale, in the emptiness, we eventually come to a level, the fundamental level of space-time geometry, the fine basement level of the universe, where there's information, there's a pattern. It's called the Planck scale, and it's the fabric of the universe. And at that level, there's information that's been there since the Big Bang.
No, there is data. Information is what we take from data and convert into human-readable form such that we can make use of it. Data is simply there in its raw state. The moon has data in huge abundance. However, the information that we are able to utilize is much less so. Until we can take this data at the Planck level and set it up such that we can examine this in a meaningful fashion, this data is meaningless.
Most people think that the vacuum is empty. But for internal consistency of quantum mechanics and relativity theory, there is required to be the equivalent of 10 to the 94 grams of mass energy, each gram being E equals mc squared kind of energy. Now that's a huge number, but what does it mean practically? Practically, if I can assume that the universe is flat, and more astronomical data is showing it's pretty darn flat. If I can assume that, then if I take the volume or take the vacuum within a single hydrogen atom, that's about 10 to the minus 23 cubic centimeters. If I take that amount of vacuum and I take the latent energy in that.
What latent energy? How is this latent energy measured? How can we replicate the measurements that we've taken to determine the existence of this latent energy?
There is 1 trillion times more energy there than in all of the mass of all of the stars and all of the planets out to 20 billion light years.
More energy in a single atomic area than in the entire universe. Again, how did Mr. Tiller come to this conclusion, and how can we replicate the experiment? Being able to tap this energy source would be the solution to the world's energy problems, so why isn't the entire energy industry working towards tapping this incredible energy source? One does have to wonder. In actual fact, the energy contained within a vacuum has so far been demonstrated using the upper limit of the cosmological constant in order of approximately 10 to the minus 15 joules per cubic centimetre, which is an absurdly small amount. This is academic, however, since this energy is zero-point energy and thus cannot be utilised without changing the zero point of the medium in which the zero point exists in. In real terms, it means that we are currently in no position to make use of vacuum energy as a power source for any technology.
That's big. That's big.
So big that again I have to wonder why we haven't made huge efforts to tap this amazing energy potential for the benefit of our species. And people wonder why I have such a hard time with pseudo-scientific nonsense like this.
And if consciousness allows you to control even a small fraction of that, creating a Big Bang is no problem.
Did you get that? If we can control a fraction of this energy he speaks of, we can create our own Big Bang. What Mr. Tiller has neglected to mention, however, is that his assertions are unfounded and nonsensical. Until he is prepared to provide evidential support for his claims, all he is doing is engaging in meaningless speculation and lacing them with non sequiturs and red herrings.
Organizations like NASA, British Aerospace, are all trying to tap into this incredible, unimaginably large energy sea. And they feel if they can tap this, we can travel to different galaxies. So they understand that in empty space, there is this unbelievable energy.
This is, if not a factual error, an outright falsehood. It would be despicable if this production were actually lying, and they have the research capacity needed to find out these answers for themselves, so I am reluctant to state that they simply didn't look into it enough. This is likely deliberate. NASA are not working on harnessing this so-called energy source. NASA are busy trying to fund current space projects that will allow them to maintain a presence in Earth orbit. The last time NASA tried to work on breakthrough energy propulsion, which is where much of this idea of tapping into vacuum energy comes from, was in 2008, admittedly after this film was made, but even before this, they were still trying to ascertain if the physics would work. They certainly weren't ready to try to find practical ways to make this work, and they certainly were nowhere near concluding that the energy available in vacuum was sufficient to be usable in space travel. All of these ideas so far presented have been speculative and have not generated any usable means of space travel.
The major basic idea that quantum physics implies, which makes us understand this or even think about this new paradigm, the thing which is that there's this underground, there's got to be a realm of existence which cannot be ever touched on or seen, which bubbles into the existence, giving rise to our understanding of the world.
Again, Mr. Wolf has asserted that there's gotta be an ever undetectable, ever unknowable force that occasionally manifests itself in observational reality. I have to ask what he's basing this on. I'm also beginning to find these people's insistence on engaging in meaningless word salad and throwing around random jargon in order to confuse their viewers really wearing thin on me about now.
The tighter physics have tried to grasp onto physical reality, to understand what it's really made of. What are the core building blocks of life, at the basis of it all? Life, the universe, slips through your fingers.
Actually, every time we've sought answers to questions about the nature of our existence, we have uncovered knowledge that has allowed us to improve our quality of life and the standards of living that we have now come to rely upon in today's age of technology and science. Further, while it is true that as we answer questions, we uncover more questions to answer, this is still progress, and there is nothing to suggest that the universe is slipping through the figurative grip of scientific observation.
And you come up with something that's increasingly abstract to come to the realm of pure abstraction.
It is now time to respond to this continued butchery of quantum theory by applying a small introduction to the concepts, minus the pseudo-scientific nonsense. A central premise to quantum physics is that the very act of watching a phenomenon changes its state. This has been tested at the quantum level via an electron beam experiment. In this case, the experiment, carried out by researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science under highly controlled conditions, demonstrated that a beam of electrons were affected by the act of being observed. The greater the amount of watching, the greater the observer's influence on what actually took place. While under observation, i.e. when conductivity was applied to an electron gate to detect the electrons passing through it, electron interference levels were consequently diminished, and the electrons behaved more like particles and less like waves. Additionally, another experiment conducted at UC Santa Barbara demonstrated quantum mechanics at the macroscopic level, again under controlled conditions. Those conditions were such that quantum effects were observed in the mechanical resonator which had been cooled to near absolute zero, at which point the molecular structure would then be close enough to non-vibration that the quantum mechanical effects could be observed. A single bit of quantum energy was added to produce the needed quantum excitation that would cause the resonator to respond as expected. The two aforementioned experiments are a demonstration of quantum mechanics in action and were observed under tightly controlled conditions that allowed for their effects to be measured appropriately. In the second case, experimentation and observation allowed for the prediction that quantum mechanics could be observed at the microscopic level to be fulfilled as expected. What these experiments do not do is demonstrate that quantum physics is in any way an abstract concept, or that quantum physics allows for people to telepathically control the world around them. It doesn't mean that we can just decide to call it pure abstraction and make stuff up about the universe.
And that's what the unified field is. It's pure abstract potential.
Repeating an error does not correct it.
Pure abstract being. Pure abstract self-aware consciousness.
Repeating an error by elaborating your sentences in a way that does not change the essential meaning of your mistake still does not correct it.
What makes up things are not more things, but what makes up things are ideas, concepts, information.
Information is an abstract concept that defines data in a way that we as intelligent beings can understand. Information does not make up things. Information describes things. Things are comprised of the elements that are found in all physical objects of the universe. Information can be changed, created, deleted, and duplicated easily by any intelligence that is capable of understanding the concept. Writing a letter, for instance. In the real world, you cannot just write a physical object into existence with your mind. Things cannot be created using magic or superstition.
Another strange fact is that objects never really touch each other. When I dribble this ball, the atoms of the ball and the atoms of the ground never actually meet.
This observation is correct at the microscopic level, but to all intents and purposes it means nothing at the level where we function and interact. We are skipping the theatrics that follow.
First inkling in physics that we got that time ain't what it seemed to be came with relativity. That was the first inkling that time was not absolute. It was not the absolute ruler of the universe. That God Almighty did not say 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter.
Interestingly enough, 1 meter is measured by the distance light travels in a vacuum at the time interval of 1/299,782,458th of a second. This is the current standard and is based on the fact that no matter how much space-time curvature exists in any given frame of reference, light travels at a constant speed through vacuum even where black holes exist. The relationship between space-time is well understood by scientists who know how to use the relationship between the two.
Your head is actually moving at a slightly faster rate than your feet.
Actually, this is only true if your frame of reference is somewhere other than the planet that you're standing on. If one wanted to be this pedantic, one could also point out that in reference to the Sun, we are moving at hundreds of thousands of kilometers per hour while making at least one full rotation every 24 hours as we go hurtling around the Sun. However, this is useless to the average person. So I also have to ask Mr. Wolf, what's your point anyway?
The second law of thermodynamics says that things unwind and move forward.
Thermodynamics deals with the transfer of heat between systems. The clue is in the name. The second law of thermodynamics states, the total entropy of a system will not decrease other than by increasing the entropy of a related system. In other words, heat flows out of a hot system into a colder one it can reach until equilibrium is achieved.
So that gives an arrow of time. But at the quantum world, in the micro world, the second law of thermodynamics doesn't seem to hold, and things can go backwards or be timeless.
To compound his error, Mr. Hameroff is now referring to temporal mechanics in his discussion on thermodynamics. Thermodynamics does not apply to the passage of time other than in a causal relationship between areas where heat is being exchanged. Quantum mechanics does not break the second law of thermodynamics. Quantum systems do not have any increase in the heat stored within them without work being carried out. Quantum physics obeys the rules of causality, and as such you cannot use quantum entanglement or quantum teleportation, much less the second law of thermodynamics, to allow for the possibility of time travel.
The fundamental equations of physics have a property which is referred to as time reversal symmetry. And what time reversal symmetry means is that a set of laws which are time reversal symmetric are laws that have the following feature. For any process that's in accord with those laws, the same process going backwards is exactly as much in accord with those laws. Okay? That ought to mean that that milk jumps out of coffee as often as it dissolves into it, that people get younger looking as often as they get older looking, that we have the same kind of access vis-a-vis knowledge to the future as we do to the past, that by acting now we ought to be able to influence the past just as much as we can influence the future. All of that is wrong. All of that, comes into violent conflict with the way we psychologically experience the world.
What Dr. Albert has just explained is that certain intuitive components of the aforementioned principles would seem to suggest that certain properties ought to function in a given manner. We actually experience, however, is that they do not. The concept of time reversal symmetry does not apply to the universe as a whole, simply because the universe obeys the second law of thermodynamics, among other laws in physics. Note Dr. Albert's statement about our psychological experience confirming that this is the case. We are now about to see Mr. Wolf take advantage of this quote mine.
One of the most unpalatable ideas still, in spite of the fact that quantum physics has been around a long time, is the possibility or the notion that the future can have a causative effect on the present. We believe that the past can have a causative effect on the present. I hold the ball, I drop it, it falls. Cause, effect when it hits the ground. But could the ground be the cause of my dropping the ball in the first place?
No. Mr. Wolf, as I expected, has misused the principle of time reversal symmetry to make statements that the future can have a causative effect on the present. He hasn't suggested that this fact, but he has suggested it's possible. In asking his question of whether the ground has caused the ball to be dropped, he has taken the ball holder's decision to release the ball out of the equation. Every conceivable observation we have ever made in terms of cause and effect has consistently belied this idea, even quantum mechanics. For even though in the case of quantum uncertainty we have an observer changing the outcome of an event simply by observing it, this is still a causal chain of events, thus causation still applies.